Hi there, this is Jeanette for Whimsy Stamps, and I have a Halloween mini card to share with you. This is part of Whimsy's 31 Nights of Halloween blog celebration, which runs from October 1st to 31st. There will be tons of projects from the design team, special guests, as well as some prizes along the way. So I hope you stop by every day this month to see the fun that's in store. I'm going to share with you how I created this mini card. I used Whimsy's clear stamp set Grim Reaper, and I stamped it on the front as well as embossed it in the inside of the card. To start, I printed out some of Whimsy's digital paper for Halloween. This is probably my favorite Halloween paper. It's from the Halloween Haunts digital paper pack, and I printed it out as a 3.5 square. And that was a great size for that figure. It sort of fit the proportion of the figure really nicely. I want to make sure that when I'm stamping the image that the face is where the moon is, so that it stays sort of a lighter color and not that yellow from the background. So I'm just trimming everything off right now, and I will end up trimming it a little bit further later on. So I'm going to use an anti-static tool here and position it into my MISTI, because I know I'm going to probably have to stamp it a few times to get a good impression, as this is the first time I'm using the stamp set. And I wanted to make sure the paper didn't move too much. So I positioned it nicely. I'm using Ranger Archival ink. It dries a little bit slower, so I know I'll be able to sprinkle that with some clear embossing powder and then heat set it. It did move a tiny little bit, but I was able to readjust and then stamp it again to get a better impression. So there's that clear embossing powder. I just sprinkled it over top and then just melted it with my heat tool, and then my image was embossed. I created my card base by cutting a piece of cardstock to measure 3.5 by 7, and then I just scored that at 3.5, and I have my mini card. Because I created the card at 3.5, I did trim down my paper so that it was more like 3.25 square. And I created a little sort of hill here using Whimsy's landscape trio dies, and the RIP is from the same stamp set, and I embossed that with some gold, and I'm just going to lay that down on the card. And it sort of grounds the image. It looks like the image is sort of floating where there's a hill, and just adds a little bit more sort of dimension to the card. I'm going to go ahead and stamp the image inside now. This time I'll be using some Versamark ink, which is a clear ink. So again, I used my anti-static tool. I'm making sure it's adhered down nicely in my MISTI, and I just wanted about half of the image stamped over there on the side, and then I was able to position the greeting exactly where I wanted it to be. So I played around with that until it was looking nice, and then I just swung the arm down here, and again, like I said, I used some Versamark ink. I pressed it down nice and firmly, and then I was able to use the gold embossing powder to emboss that. So I'm just going to sprinkle it over top here. I have a scrap piece of paper to sort of catch all the loose embossing powder that falls over. Try to get it all back into the bottle, and then I'll just tap it to make sure that anything else that's loose sort of falls off. There was a portion that didn't get enough embossing powder, so I'm making sure that's nicely covered before I go ahead and melt that with my heat tool. So now you can see what that looks like inside. I decided that I wanted to add a little bit of color to the front of the card, and so I'm using some Prismacolor pencils just to add a little bit of color. So I'll zoom in here a little bit so that you can see a little bit better. So these are the crayons that I used. I'm listing them on the screen. So I started off with a darker gray, and then I took a lighter gray and sort of blended that all together. Then I decided to color this part of the scythe the same color. And I did add a little bit of brown to the bottom of that. And then colored the upper portion with that as well. I decided to go with a sort of green face just for a little bit of contrast on the card. So here are the colors I used. So again, I started with the mid color, the second darkest color, and I blended that with the lighter color. And then I went back in later and added some of the darker color for a little more contrast. And you can see that that just sort of blends nicely together on the paper. And it sort of makes the face pop out a little bit more. And because the background behind the face was that moon color, which was white, it was pretty easy to get a nice green color. I'm going to color the heart in red, and then just sort of the highlights on the cloak I'm going to do with this sort of buttercream color. I did some over here too, and that just adds a little bit of contrast. I'm going to lighten up the eyes a little bit and where the teeth were. And then I decided to go in with that darker green just to add a little more contrast. Gives it a little bit more depth, and then I blended it again so that you don't see any lines. The final thing I decided to do, or the second final thing, was to add some shimmers to the sickle or the scythe, and then I added these tiny adhesive clear rhinestones for his eyes, and that just makes them look really ghoulish and fun. I really like that touch of detail for the eyes. And that is my mini card done. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed watching me create this mini card using Whimsy's products. Again, please join us every day of October for more fun, more projects, and some fun prizes. Thanks for watching.